Technology-based narratives. So storytelling has always been the primary form of communication with humans. I mean, you can go back to the cave people days, and you had hieroglyphics. I'm sure they sat around the campfire telling stories as soon as there was language, even probably before that, non-verbally. So storytelling is intrinsic to human nature, and we could get into some of the reasons for that, but I want to focus a little bit of an extension of that and talk about how narratives have evolved and may evolve continuing into the future. So it's basically been, perhaps since radio, that narratives started to be tied more to technology. So obviously, actually maybe back until the printing press, if you want to go a little bit back before that, because before that, narratives were kind of like oral narratives, oral history, based upon memory, and they were more limited in scope, both in terms of distribution, because you could only distribute who you could talk to personally, geographically, and also in terms of scope, because to tell a story, you couldn't recite a 1,000-page book in a story. You'd be too tired. So they were time constrained and they were geography constrained narratives. But with the use of technology has been basically a springboard to expand the distribution and scope of narratives and also the complexity of them. So with books, for example, the printing press and pamphlets, you had much more diversity of thought and opinions because those are directly tied to narratives. So for example, in the Revolutionary War, they used pamphlets to espouse different ideas. So you could have counterculture ideas when you had the technology to enable that. Then with radio, you had a lot of different shows and proliferation of ideas. TV narratives became mass media, and then obviously in radio and TV, you had the rise of advertising. Obviously, even before radio, you could have narratives through letters, which you could send to people, through the Pony Express and then the post office. But now through the internet really allowed narratives to become global. It's kind of the globalization of narrative, and basically become community-based. So you have Facebook groups, but you also have political groups. You have all different kind of groups and communities that spring up between people both locally and regionally and nationally and internationally. And in the future, towards other planets also. I mean, as we start to inhabit Mars and other planets, probably after that, the communities will become interplanetary and inter-solar system, and potentially even intergalactic. So another factor that's affecting communities in the future in terms of advent of technology is also what some people call kind of like a post-truth world. In the past, you could kind of rely on Walter Cronkite or just a few people to decide what was most newsworthy. But now you have tons and tons of blogs and social media and YouTube. So everybody kind of is their own broadcaster. So in terms of the future, tying some of these trends together, it's going to move more from an examination in terms of what is truth. Now you have deep fakes. You have people talking about fake news. It's going to be kind of trying to establish, what are the standards, or are there standards? I mean, the same thing with artificial intelligence. How do we keep it benign? What is ethics? What are community standards? They say, the least common denominator, the tragedy of the commons. A lot of sites had to block comments, especially if they were anonymous, because things got out of control. So narratives in the future will be a lot more kind of, and we're going to have to evolve even a new technology, a new terminology, lexicon to describe them, because, with the advent of augmented reality, virtual reality, deep fakes and things of this nature. It's going to be, and also like neural interfaces where people have like more integrated capabilities. Like people are already integrated with their phones because people go into depression or anxiety if they don't have their phone, and also sometimes anxiety and depression if they spend too much time on social media or on their phones. But it's going to be like a real gap between people that are very technologically immersed, people that are living in VR worlds versus people that are not, the quality and scope and type of those worlds. So the narratives of the future will be very constrained by what is considered to be real and not real, and also by the technology of the future. I mean, how is the Internet of Things going to affect narratives when devices are communicating with each other? You'll have, like, Facebook had to shut down their chatbots because they developed their own language. What's going to happen when the cars start talking to each other? What's going to happen with artificial intelligence, and how's that going to affect narratives when you have narratives created by and promulgated and perhaps controlled by non-humans? How is blockchain going to affect narratives? We talked about VR. So these are some of the factors that are going to that we're going to be living with in a technology-based, technology-driven, narrative-based world.